So one of the Bible's big ideas is that there is a physical world, but there's also a spiritual world. And there is a connection between those two worlds. That's one of the, if we look at the kind of big ideas, look at the scenic overlook from here, is we're in the spot in the story where we've got prophets, kings, Israel, Judah, and there's this constant up and down. Sometimes Israel's doing well, sometimes Judah's doing well, but they're just going up and down. It's like the stock market. They're sometimes thriving, sometimes struggling. I think what that shows us is one of these ideas in the Bible that's so essential to it, that's almost assumed, that a lot of times we fail to see it. I want to show you what that idea is, okay? And here's what I'd say. Big idea. There's a connection between the physical world and the spiritual world. They interact with each other. I think you're seeing this all over right now with the story of the divided kingdom, Israel and Judah. It's when Judah, like a guy like a king like Jehoshaphat, when he's synchronized with God, it doesn't matter if there's a coalition of different enemies all pressing in on him. It's going to turn out, he doesn't even have to fight that battle. They fight amongst themselves, and Jehoshaphat goes through with his army and just picks up all the plunder. It's not because Jehoshaphat bribed God into some kind of agreement where God came through for them that time. No. It's because Jehoshaphat was in a spot at that point in Judah's history where he was understanding that their relationship with God was the determining factor on how they were going to fare as people, politically, geopolitically, financially, and even socially. All of that tied to how are we doing with God. And that's what I mean when I say there's a connection between the physical world. But here's the thing that I feel like by default, I tend to think that the physical world leads out on that. By that I mean I'm in circumstances, I'm feeling stressed, I'm feeling like something pops up I need to deal with, I'm feeling anxious about it, I'm feeling overwhelmed. So then, now's the time to dial up and get in touch with my spiritual connection with God. But that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about the opposite. The physical reality does not lead out. The spiritual reality does. How God's people are doing in their spiritual relationship with God, that's the determining factor on how they're doing in any physical measure. And that's not just in this part of the story. If you step back for a minute and take a look at the bigger story, from beginning to end, I think you see this. In fact, if you go back to the very opening moments of the story that it tells, in the beginning, God created. God is a spiritual being. It just means he doesn't have a body. It doesn't mean he's not a person. He's some kind of ethereal idea. Again, from the Bible's perspective, God is very much alive, interactive, and personal. Since he's got emotions, he has volition, he's got a will, he acts, he thinks, he moves. He's a person, capital P. He is the initiator of the physical reality, the universe. In the beginning, God created. Spiritual makes the physical, in the sense that God, spiritual being, creates a tangible physical world. And this is not like some kind of magical voodoo way where if I get spiritual power, I can make things happen in the physical world. It's just that the spiritual world, my relationship with God, influences and sets the table for what happens in my physical life. Let me phrase it like this. As I look at, this was my enchanted moment for the week. This personally, the moment I sat back as we were reading and went, wow. And it's this idea of the physical world being the tail on the dog getting wagged by the spiritual world. Here's where I'm landing with it. I'm saying my choices reveal what I believe is real. It doesn't make reality. Reality is. But what I choose reveals what I believe is real. The kings of Judah and Israel, when they believe that their relationship with God is the foundation point, it's reality, and it's setting the tone for everything else in the physical world. Are we having a famine? Are we getting worn out by our hostile neighbors? All of this is coming from how are we doing in our relationship with God? Are we synchronized with Him? Are we following and obeying Him? And if we are, we're going to be okay. Even if we're in a hard time, it's not going to crush us and destroy us. All right? We're going to survive it, not because we've bribed God into liking us, but because we are involved in the battle and the work that God is involved in. And God doesn't take L's. And so if I'm there behind Him and He's doing the fighting, I'm not going to take an L either. Not because I get to set the tone of battle, but because I'm following on the coattails of God doing what He does in the irresistible way that He does it. I see this is not just an Old Testament idea, by the way. I see this in the New Testament too. Take a look at this really quick. In the New Testament, we're looking at 2 Corinthians chapter 4, and I think Paul is describing this same kind of relationship between physical circumstances and the spiritual reality. Take a listen to this. He talks about how he's been given the good news about Jesus, and he and his company, they're on the move and they're sharing this good news, but it's hard too. They're facing a lot of opposition. And so he says, we have this light shining in our hearts. That's the good news about Jesus. He says, but we ourselves are like fragile clay jars containing this great treasure. This makes it clear that our great power is from God and not from ourselves. We're pressed on every side by troubles, but we're not crushed. We are perplexed, but not driven to despair. We're hunted down, but never abandoned by God. We get knocked down, but we're not destroyed. And through suffering, our bodies continue to share in the death of Jesus so that the life of Jesus may be seen in our bodies. Do you see that physical and spiritual reality? Yes, the circumstance for Paul and his companions, they're feeling troubles, perplexed, hunted down, knocked down, suffering. It's real. But that doesn't have the final say because there's a spiritual reality behind it where troubled but not crushed, perplexed but not despairing, hunted down but not abandoned by God. The spiritual reality of a relationship with God is setting the tone for what's happening in his physical life. It's not easy, but it's also not everything. Physical life may not be easy, but it's not everything. So I think Paul would sign on to this. My choices reveal what I believe is real. Perplexed? How are we responding? Well, not despairing, not driven to despair, right? So once again, big idea from the Bible as I look at this. This is a big idea in our story right now. There's a connection between the physical and spiritual world, and physical circumstances flow downstream from spiritual realities. It's every bit as important to pay attention to our relationship with God, how we're doing in relation to Him and other people, as it is to gear up for battle against what we feel like we're facing in the physical world.